Thank you. I live in a town called Cary. Has anyone heard of Cary? All right, we've got some hands up. If you're not familiar, it stands for the Containment Area for Relocated Yankees. And I moved here almost 11 years ago to the day from Connecticut, so I am guilty as charged. I always like to share this when I start out. I moved here 11 years ago. Anyone here a fan of HGTV at all? Yeah, a few? So when my family and I made the move here 11 years ago, we did the show House Hunters. Yeah. And I tell people I learned very quickly that there's not a lot of reality in reality television. In fact, they don't even tell you that you're going to make it onto the show till you have a contract on the house you've already bought. And then they show you two places that you never saw as part of the experience. So next time you're yelling at the TV, they probably didn't see that house that you thought was perfect for them. So artists did a great job kind of queuing up what I'm going to talk about today. All going to be about unifying that student experience. And I'm going to share insights from the blue goldfish and the purple goldfish. And simply how we can leverage technology, data, and analytics to improve the experience that we provide. So I want to first start with a story, because we're talking about technology, right? And I want to take you all the way back to 1981. And I want to tell you a story about a newspaper called the Houston Post. Has anyone ever heard of the Houston Post? So this used to be, it's no longer around, it used to be the evening paper in Houston. And I'm going to take you all the way back to 1981, and it was the summer of 81. And there was a 16-year-old named Michael who got hired by the Houston Post. And his job was to sell subscriptions to the newspaper. And here was the amazing piece of technology he was given. He was given a telephone, and all he got was a list of new phone numbers for people in Houston. And his job was to smile and dial. Now, very quickly, Michael had an insight. And his insight was this: there was only two groups of people that ever subscribed to the Houston Post. The first was people who were buying a new home in Houston, and the second was people that had just gotten married. And those two groups made up pretty much all of the subscriptions. So Michael was pretty industrious. He had some friends that weren't, other 16-year-old friends that weren't doing stuff in Houston. He told them to go around the entire city and find as many lists of people that had bought a home or had just got married. And based on that data that he got, Michael put together a letter that he sent each of those people, congratulating them on their new home or their new union of marriage, and talked about the benefits of subscribing to the Houston Post. Now, did it work? Yeah, it worked. That summer, he earned $18,000 in commissions. He became the highest grossing salesperson for the entire year at the Houston Post. By the way, what do you do when you're 60? By the way, 18,000, to put it in perspective, was more than Michael's home economics teacher made the entire year back in 1981. So what do you do when you're 16 and you make that type of money? You buy a red Corvette. Now, Michael would go off to the University of Texas just less than 2 years later, and in the sophomore year at UT, he started a computer company in his dorm room. Does anybody know the Michael I'm talking about? Michael Dell. right? And I wanted to start with the story because it was based on this little insight that he made, that he could understand the customer that he served better, and then he personalized that experience through that letter, and look at the results that he had. And I share this story because I think there's a much more basic insight from this story, and it's based upon how our brain works as human beings. Now, my wife she thinks I have a small brain. She calls it my Homo sapien brain. And it turns out we are hardwired when we have an experience like this to act favorably, right? When somebody sees us as an individual and delivers that experience, it's a positive thing. And the reason being, as we evolved as human beings, right? When we walked out of the cave, right? Nearly 80% of how we viewed people was done in a split second. And it came down to two questions. So as we walked out of the cave and we came across someone, the first question was always this: what is their intent towards me? Right? Are they a friend or are they a foe? And then very quickly, number two, you assess what's their ability to carry out that intent. Does that make sense? What is their intent towards me? And two, what's their ability to carry it out? Now, it turns out that 80% of how we view other people and over 50% of how people view your organization, your school, come down to just these two questions. And social psychologists will break this down. The intent piece is what they call warmth, and the ability to carry it out is called competence. Now, you can matrix this out, right? You can be seen as high warmth, you can be seen as low warmth. You can be seen as high competence and low competence. And so I want to bring this together with kind of 4 companies that we can look at. And where do they fit in this matrix? And we're going to start with BP. Who lives near the Gulf of Mexico here? Anyone? A lot of opportunity artists near the Gulf of Mexico, I think, for you. But where do you think BP would fit on this matrix? Where would most people? Imagine you live near the Gulf. I hear low end, right? Based on how they handled Deepwater Horizon, what did they show? That they didn't have the right intent and they struggled with carrying it out. Now, what's the feeling that we get when we deal with an organization that's down here in the bottom left? I always like to show this. Does anyone want to put like their cable company? Maybe, right? Or the phone company? It's a feeling of disgust, right? When we don't feel seen, we don't trust their intent, they struggle with carrying it out. And this is important, so much so that maybe anger or disgust that we go out of our way to tell other people what? Don't go there. Don't do business there, right? Now, this is always controversial, and you can't put them next to BP, but next up is the U.S. Postal Service. Where would you put the U.S. Postal Service? I hear low, high, high, low. Let me tell you about my mailman. His name is Joe. Here in North Carolina, they drive up in this cool little Jeep. And when Joe drives up, he always has a dog biscuit for my dog, McMurphy. He's got a smile that would make your day. But I tell people, if I needed to get a package from here in Raleigh to LA tomorrow, am I going to walk into the post office? Probably not. So I think we can make the case that, at least for me, I would say they exist up here in the top left. They have the right intention, right, but their ability to carry it out. And so what's the feeling that we get when we deal with an organization that's here? It's kind of a sense of like pity, right? Now, for the longest time, you could put the VA hospital up here in the top left, right? They have the right intent, but their ability to carry it out is in question, right? We want them to do better. How about Rolex? Where do you put Rolex? From competence, right, they make one of the best timepieces in the world, right? But how do they do on the warmth equation? Can't afford it. Now, I'm not a Rolex guy, so I would say most people would put them down here in the bottom right, right? Really competent, but maybe not the warmest. Now, here's the deal. You can exceed and excel here if you're in the bottom right, but you're not going to engender kind of that deep relationship. And for some people, it may be a sense of the feeling of envy or jealousy. Like, I feel like I'm on the outside for this organization. Now, when you hear the story of Michael Dell and the Houston Post, where do we put Michael, at least, in the Houston Post? We put them in the top right here, right? We understood through his outreach that he understood the individuals that he was dealing with. He made that personalized outreach, and he did it in a way that was highly competent. And when we deal with organizations that can achieve up here in the right, what's the feeling that we have? Is it a good feeling? Yeah, I would say it's even a sense of what? Pride, right? And here's the important thing, like, I belong because of the experience, and I might even go out of my way to tell other people what? That they also should be part of this, right? All right, so here's the challenge as we think about being the idea of warmth and competence. Expectations, right? The expectations for the students that you serve, their expectations are really high. And this is some research from, and this is actually not just looking at students, but all consumers, that the expectations are rising for everyone. So here's the first one. For 3 out of 4 people, they expect an organization that organization is going to understand their individual needs. Over 4 out of 5 expect when they deal with an organization that the response time that they get is going to be accelerated. It's going to be quicker. And over 2 out of 3 anticipate that when they deal with an organization, that organization is going to harmonize the experience, meaning that they can deal with you in one channel, and then when they go to another channel, it's going to be in harmony, right? So if that's the challenge, that these expectations are rising, what's the solution? And this is, unfortunately, this is Jack Welch. We lost Jack during the pandemic. Former CEO of GE. He said something that I believe is the solution going forward. He said, if we want to achieve competitive advantage, there's only 2 things we need to do. He said, 1, we need to learn about the customers that we have faster than our competition. But he said that only gets you knowledge, right? You have to do the second part. And what Jack said, you have to turn those insights into action faster than your competition. Right. What I think he's talking about is a concept that trendwatching.com calls InfoSense. And InfoSense is simply this. It's the ability to use data to really understand the customers that you serve and then individualize the experience that you provide for them. So I'm going to tell you today that you need to leverage technology and data to provide that great experience. But here's the thing, and this is blacked out for a reason. Don't freak out, it's blacked out. Because I have a little bit of a confession to make. Mallory talked about some of the big brands I used to work for, Adidas, the PGA, for a short time, a couple of years with the New York Yankees. Anyone a Yankee fan here? All right, come on. Come on. And I spent over 2 decades in marketing because I'm going to tell you that you need to focus on the students that you have and provide a great experience. But as a marketer, I didn't focus on the student or the customer. I focused on the prospect and trying to get them into the funnel. And everything I did was focused on eyeballs and earlobes. I used to chase this thing called impressions. How can we create exposure and awareness? And I didn't pay attention to actually the experience. And I used to do some crazy things. Let me share some of the things I used to do. I once helped create the world's largest logo. Can anyone make that out? Who is that? It's the Colonel. And it was only the 3rd time that they'd ever changed the logo for the Colonel, and they wanted to launch it in a big way, globally. So we built this out near Area 51 in Nevada. It was called the Face from Space. And it was so big you could actually see it from space. And I know that because we shot it with the Google satellite. This program created 650 million media impressions. It went viral, right? I've done things like create a 70-foot tall M&M, put it on a barge, and float it right into New York Harbor, right in front of Lady Liberty herself. Now, this was a program to launch a website where you could create your own version of yourself as an M&M. Did anyone ever do this? It was ultra successful. People spent tons of time on this site, super engaged. I used to live in the Pacific Northwest, so this was fun. Anyone from the P&W here? All right, we got one. Yeah, me and you love coffee, so you're going to love this. I once helped launch the everyday coffee for Starbucks called Pike Place Roast by rebuilding the original Starbucks for one day in Bryant Park in New York City. That's Howard Schultz. He said it was the loudest and the largest event that Starbucks had ever done. Now, when I did this one, I started to question myself. I did this for Walmart. I put a 40-foot Viking ship into Times Square. This was to launch all of the merchandise for a movie called How to Train Your Dragon. And I said to myself, Stan, when you did this, you've kind of jumped the shark. You went a little bit too far. But no, not when I did this next event. And let me tell you, I once gave away a Mediterranean island for I can't believe it's not butter. And it gets worse. With Fabio. Right? Now here's the thing. A lot of these programs were successful. Again, some went viral, won awards. But here's the thing. They weren't either scalable and they weren't sustainable. And I thought to myself, I was a marketer, I just realized I was part of the problem and not part of the solution. And I'll never forget it. It's all the way back in 2009, and I was living in Connecticut. I went into New York City because I was going to an event, and I was at one of these rooftop bars in Manhattan. Has anybody went to one of these bougie places? Right? Where you can enjoy a $20 beer? Is it possible to enjoy a $20 beer? And I'll never forget, I'm with my colleague Brad. We're about to go to this industry event, and we're waiting for some people to join us. And as we're waiting in this crowded bar, there's an older gentleman sitting right across from me. And he's on his own, and every couple minutes, out of the corner of my eye, I notice that he scans the entire bar. And a half an hour goes by, and no one's showing up for this guy. And so I start to feel bad for him. So I lean in just to start a conversation and go, excuse me, I go, do you know we spend 10% of our life waiting? Has anyone heard that stat before? 10%. Do you believe it? You say more? Do you live in Southern California? Right? Now, I told him, I looked at him, I go, I know it's true because I once read it on the internet. So it has to be true, all right? And somehow we just started conversation. And I remember growing up, my dad was big on this idea of always being on time. So I said something to him about, I don't know, Vince Lombardi time or something. And this guy looked me in the eye and he said, on time, he said, no one in life is ever on time. And I went, wait a second. I go, I've been on time before. I go, not often, but... And he went, no, no, no. And he stuck his finger in my face and gave me the Dikembe finger wave. And he doubled down. He said, in fact, he said, on time is a myth. He said, no one in life is ever just on time. And he went further. He said, people in life are either early or they're late. And I remember the time, it just stuck with me. And I took the train home to Connecticut that night. I thought to myself, that same thinking applies to any customer or even student that you serve. Does anyone here in this room simply just meet the expectations of that student? Right? I would argue that it's impossible. You don't just exactly meet their expectation. Here's the thing, you either exceed their expectations or what? You fall short. I like that. You're really leaning into that. I like that. Yeah, you fall short. And I'll never forget it at the time, literally the next day, I said to myself, I'm going to start to look for organizations that do little things to exceed the expectations. And I started this thing called the Purple Goldfish Project. So really quickly, I'm going to try to speed through this. Why a goldfish and why the colors? And I'm going to start with why a goldfish. So does everyone here remember their very first pet? Who remembers their first pet? What did you have?
A yellow lab.
A yellow lab. How old were you?
My parents had the dog first.
Oh, they loved the dog more, and then you came along. Okay. Do you remember your own very first pet?
Yeah, that dog passed away when I was like 4th grade.
Okay, 4th grade. Okay, gotcha. And you got another dog? Yeah. Awesome. What was your dog's name? Hen? Hendy. Gotcha. Cool. So for me, I'll never forget it, I was 6 years old. All right, this is a picture when I was 6, and I always feel compelled to do this. Look at all the hair I had. Right? Blonde I was. I was good looking. Still had the glasses. And I'll never forget it. I went to a carnival, right? And I threw a ping pong ball. Has anyone done that? Right? And I was so excited. I came home with a bag of goldfish. I remember my mom wasn't quite as excited as I was. And I remember my goldfish was pretty small. And it turns out that the average goldfish is just 3 inches in length. It's the size of an average person's thumb, is 3 inches, right? Now, some grow to be less than 3 inches, but some grow to be bigger than 3 inches. If you had to guess the world's largest goldfish, how many inches? Shout it out. What do you think? 7? More? 24. This is like wisdom of the crowd. I love it. 7, 24. What else? 16. We put all 3 of those together. This is wisdom of the crowd. You're looking at the world's largest goldfish, right? Not a koi or a carp, an average ordinary goldfish, and I know this because I did a workshop for the folks at Guinness World Records, nearly 20 inches in length. Right? And to put that in perspective, if this is average, 20 inches is the size of an average domesticated house cat. That would be like walking out, right, and bumping into somebody who's as tall as where the ceiling connects here. 6 to 7 times the size of average. And that intrigued me. Why do some grow to be average and others grow to be bigger? And it turns out that there are 5 reasons why a goldfish will grow. Right? But those same 5 reasons apply to each and every organization that's in the room today. Right? Each and every school. And so I'm going to have some fun with this. I'm going to come down and I'm going to explain each of the 5 factors. And if you think you know how that affects school, we'll get you a book. I might need a handheld. What do you think? There you go. This is going to be interesting with a handheld in the books. Awesome. All right, excellent. No problem. All right, so here's the first one. Do you mind being my assistant? Awesome, thank you. Awesome, you can be like the Vanna White character. Show them the first one, that's gray. Gray, all about the generations. Then diamond, right? These are your choices. Gold is next. And then behind that one is blue. So that's your choices if you win. Thank you for helping out. So here's the first one if you're a goldfish, right? As most people heard this, your ability to grow is dependent upon the size of the bowl or the pond that you're in. So the bigger the bowl, the bigger the pond, it's a direct correlation, the more you grow. So what's the size of the bowl or the pond for your school? It's what that you serve. It's the students, but I'm looking for the M word. It's think about it in business. It would be, who said market? All right, can you hook him up right there? You got gold, blue, diamond, or let him pick, or gray. But be quick about picking. All right, does that make sense? Like the larger the market that you serve, the bigger the area that your students come in from, the more you could potentially grow your enrollment. Okay? Now, the second one is so simple, no one gets a book for it, right? Because you're going to know this right away. Your ability to grow is also dependent upon what? The number of other goldfish in your bowl or pond. And this works in an inverse relationship, right? So the more goldfish that there are in that bowl or pond, the less the goldfish typically grows. So, again, this is so simple. Who are the other goldfish for you? Yeah, it's your competition, right? The other schools that you compete against. And it makes sense. The more schools that you compete against, the harder it's going to be to grow your enrollment. So here's number 3. And number 3 used to be the most difficult of these 5 until March 13th, 2020. Does anybody remember that? Black Friday, it was. Because if you're a goldfish, the quality of the water that you're in will determine how big you can get. And so the clearer the water, the more nutrients in the water, the more a goldfish typically grows. So for this one, I want you to think kind of macro. What's the quality of that surrounding environment for your organization and business? What is it? Staff. You're thinking staff, culture, that's more internal. I want you to think macro. Who said the E word? Did someone say an E word? What did you say?
The economy, yes. Wow, I'm making you work. Who has got my books? You got to go all the way to the back. What do we have left? We've got blue, gray, and gold. All right, you get to pick in the back there. Wow, thank you, Vanna. I appreciate that. But does that make sense economy-wise? Like those external factors, like the ability to maybe get financial aid. It could be consumer confidence, like people's willingness to go and pursue higher education. Could be the ability to, with the pandemic, to be able to travel somewhere to go to school, the ability to do virtual. All of those things affect your ability to grow. Here's number 4 if you're a goldfish. How you do in your first 4 months of life. I'll give a book to anyone who can tell me what you call a baby goldfish. It's not a guppy. So, by the way, when they're born, they are tiny. They have 80 to 100 brothers and sisters. They're the size of the top of a pin. A baby goldfish is called a fry. It's where small fry comes from, right? So how they get out of the gate is absolutely key. I want you to put more of a business hat on. What are you called in business your first 4 months of life? You're a, did you say the S word? Startup. Yeah, absolutely. All right, here we go. What do we got left? We've got gold or gray? Gold. We were just talking about gold. That's awesome. Gold's all about kind of what we call your vital few, right? Your top 20%. Awesome. So does that make sense? How you do and how do you get out of the gate will determine ultimately how big you get. Now, I'm going to make a small assumption that almost everyone has been with an institution that's been around for more than 4 months. Is that a good assumption? All right. Here's number 5 if you're a goldfish, right? Genetic makeup. So for a goldfish, what are they born with that separates them from all of the other goldfish? And the stronger their genes are, and the more that they're actually separated, the bigger they get. But conversely, if their genes are weak and they're like everyone else, the less they typically grow. What's genetic makeup for your organization? You said the D word. What'd you say? Differentiation. We got the winner here. I think we've got, where's my person with the books? We've got gray. Would you like gray or gray? All right, you get gray. Here you go. Yeah, the extent that you're what? You're different from everyone else. Now, here's the thing I would tell you. If we're being honest, the product and service that you provide isn't probably all that different from what your competition provides. But how you provide it and why you provide it are the things that make you stand out. So how do you stand out in what I would call a sea of sameness? And that's all about the experience that you provide to the students that you serve. All right, and we mentioned this already, right? Of the 5 things, the market, the competition, the economy, we already threw out startup and differentiation. What's the only thing that you control? Right? Does anyone here control the market? No. How about your competition? Does anyone here control the economy? Please see me afterwards. Right? If we're being honest, there's only one thing that you control, and that's the experience that you provide to the students that you serve. So the goldfish and growth is just a matter of how important it is to differentiate the experience. Now, why the colors? So I'm going to start with purple. We're going to talk about purple and blue. So purple is an ode to this iconic American city. What city am I talking about? New Orleans, yeah. And it's an ode to the most famous event in New Orleans, which is Jazz Festival. No, Mardi Gras. Some people might say Jazz Festival, but they're lying. Because purple is one of three official colors: purple, green, and gold. And the reason why it's an ode to New Orleans is that there's one word that comes from New Orleans that exemplifies this concept of doing a little bit more. And it dates all the way back to the 1800s. And Mark Twain, in his autobiography, said this was a word worth traveling all the way to New Orleans to get. And that word is called lagniappe. Who's heard of lagniappe before? You from New Orleans? Shout it out. What's lagniappe? A little more, a little extra. And so again, it started back in the 1800s. It's Creole. It's French and Spanish. It literally means the additional gift, or to your point, to give more. And so it was the idea that if you're in New Orleans and you did a transaction, that the business would do a little something extra to honor the relationship. A little something that was thrown in for good measure, to go beyond just expectation. By the way, if you want to phonetically write this, it's Lanyap. And then maybe afterwards you can explain to me why phonetic doesn't start with an F. Would be great. All right, so the purple bit, and thank you for Element for getting everyone a book, which is awesome. Let's talk about the blue in Blue Goldfish. So that was inspired by this guy right here. He was a 10th century Danish king named King Harald Gormson. Pretty interesting guy. He united all of Scandinavia. He converted the Danes to Christianity. And he was notorious because one of his front teeth died, and over the course of time, his tooth discolored. And so he was known by his nickname, which was Bluetooth. And so back in the 1990s, we don't have to go back too far, Sony, Ericsson, IBM were all trying to figure out a common standard for short-range wireless. And they wanted to avoid, and Sony especially wanted to avoid this. Do you remember when there was VHS tapes and then there were Betamax tapes? Right? They wanted to avoid two competing standards. So they came together to create a consortium. And the engineers were, one night, they were in Toronto and they were having a few beers and they said, we need to come up with a code name for this project. And one of the engineers was reading a book about this guy right here, a book called The Longships. And they liked this guy, the idea of convergence and bringing people together. He united all of Scandinavia. And so they said, oh, Bluetooth would be an awesome name, thinking the whole time that marketing would come in and create a different name for the standard. They never did. They couldn't come up with something better than that. And what's interesting is if you look at Bluetooth, it is a combination of two letters, the Nordic H and the Nordic B. And you put them together, you get what? That iconic symbol of Bluetooth. And so blue is about this idea of convergence, leveraging technology, data, and analytics. That was the inspiration. So my co-author and I created what's called the Blue Goldfish Project. And we specifically looked for organizations that leverage technology, data, and analytics to improve the experience that they provided to their stakeholders. And it turns out if you do this right, there's 8 different ways that you can do this. And those 8 different ways fall into 3 main categories, what we call the 3 R's. Relationship, responsiveness, and readiness. Relationship, responsiveness, and readiness. Remember the IBM thing? 76+%, 3 out of 4 expect that you're going to understand their individual needs. That's all about the relationship. 81% they wanted an improved response time. That's about responsiveness. And then the ability to harmonize the experience across different channels. That's the idea of what we call readiness. And so what I want to do is give you examples from both academia and outside of academia of how this can work. And I'm going to take you all the way, we're going to start with relationship, and I'm going to take you all the way to Australia and New Zealand. And there's a bank in Australia and New Zealand called Westpac. Has anyone heard of Westpac before? Way in the back. So they have, they're the 3rd largest bank in Australia and New Zealand, which means they've got just over 1 million customers. And each month, they have over 100 million transactions with those customers. Right? So they got this amazing treasure trove of data. And what they've been able to do is look at the life cycle of all of their customers. And over the life cycle, which products and services that their customers used. And then using analytics, they started to understand the needs of their customers. And they created a program, it's called the Know Me program. And for 70% of their customers the first year, they would look at where they were in the life cycle, and they would anticipate what the next best product was for that customer. And they would put it in the system for that customer. Now, the next time that customer walked into a branch or they called customer service for a transaction, at the end of the transaction, the bank teller or the customer service person would look in the system and make the offer of that product or service. Now, let me back up here for a second, because I used to work in marketing. If we made the same offer to 100% of our customers, what would be an amazing conversion rate? Who said what? 30%. Wow. So 100% of all of your customers, you make them an offer, you think 30%? Industry average is between 1 to 2%. Right? If you could convert 5%, you get a raise in promotion in marketing. Right? But think about it, even if you converted 5%, what have you done for the other 95% where the offer was not meaningful to them? Right? You've annoyed them. So for these guys, again, it wasn't a salesperson, it was a bank teller or a customer service. Over the course of the first year, when they made that offer, they converted, this next best offer, they converted 46% of those offers. Because it was fine-tuned to the need, individual need of that customer. Right? And they were able to personalize that for the customer. By the way, for Westpac, that drove over $20 million to their bottom line. But here's the thing, beyond those dollars, for Westpac, when you take somebody who has 2 products with you and now they have 3, or they have 3 products and now they have 4, what are they less likely to do? They're less likely to leave. Right? So you're fulfilling more of their needs, the retention goes up, the profitability goes up. Right? So great example from Element. This is Florida State College in Jacksonville. I love this. One of the main ways that they use element 451 is when somebody reaches out, right? In the system, they can quickly look up that student and tell exactly where they are on their journey. And they don't have to ask that student to repeat where they are. They can simply address the needs based upon where they are in the journey, right? Essentially, what are they doing? They're saying to that student in so many words, we know who you are, let's get where you need to go. And I love that as a little way that they personalize using element 451. Second type under relationship. And it's a category that we call personal data. And it's the idea of how do you give people control of their own data to potentially influence their behavior. All right, and I love this. This is from insurance. This is John Hancock. They have a program called Vitality. And it's an elective program that if you decide that you're going to be part of this program, you're essentially buying in that you're going to give them data about your health choices. And here's the thing, if you make good choices, you exercise, you eat well, your premiums for your insurance can go down by as much as 25%. But here's the deal, they can also go up by as much as 25%. So if you're not exercising, you're not eating healthfully, right? And I love this idea of giving people more control of their own data to influence their behavior. Personalization and personal data in relationship. The second R is responsiveness. And there are three types within responsiveness. First one we're going to talk about is this idea of customer service 3.0. Customer service 3.0. So that's my Uncle Jeff. Does anybody know my Uncle Jeff? I wish I had an Uncle Jeff. So Jeff Bezos set out when he created Amazon to create Earth's most customer-centric company, right? What's interesting, if you work at Amazon, whenever they have a meeting, there's always an empty seat at the table. Even if there's more people than there are chairs, and who does that empty seat represent? For them, it's their customer. They ever want to make a decision without thinking about how does this apply to the customers that we serve. So a number of years ago, Amazon created their tablet, right? And it was the Fire. And when they created the Fire, it was typically aimed at older people in the demographic. People that weren't familiar with using a tablet, and they wanted to make them comfortable, so they created a thing on the tablet called the Mayday button. Has anyone used Mayday before? All right, so when you were on the tablet, it was right there at the top of the tablet, you could simply push the button, the Mayday button, and the guarantee was within 15 seconds, someone would pop up on your screen and help you with any challenge you were having with the tablet, right? And you could give that person control of the tablet, and they could help you figure out whatever you wanted. By the way, they couldn't see you, you could only see them. So you didn't have to worry about what you were wearing. Here's a quick video on how it works.
Mayday.
Thank you for pressing the Mayday button. How can I help you?
Whoa, who are you?
I'm Amy, a tech advisor for your new Kindle Fire.
I didn't realize I'd get a live person.
Yep, we're here 24/7. We can draw on your screen and even show you how to use different features.
So I can just press the Mayday button and you're here to help?
Hit Mayday and I'm coming to the rescue.
Amy, I like you.
Aw.
Introducing the revolutionary Mayday button, only on the new Kindle Fire HDX.
Now, when Amazon came out and announced this, it was right around April 1st a number of years ago. And when it came out, many people thought this has got to be the biggest April Fool's Day joke. Especially when they said within 15 seconds that someone was going to pop on your screen to help you. Here's the thing, they weren't successful with the 15 seconds. Because after a year, the average time was 9 seconds. Imagine that from a customer service perspective. When you have an issue, you simply push a button and someone is there to help you. There is a term within experience, it's called the Amazon effect. Has anyone heard of the Amazon effect? Because when your students are dealing with you, they're thinking about how easy is it to get what I need when I deal with folks like Uber or Amazon, right? And they expect that similar experience. So how are you taking your customer service that may be at a 1.0 right now, but taking it up to 2.0 and 3.0? So this is a small example of this. Using Element 451, this is a small college, Villa Maria College. Anyone here from Villa Maria? All right, they're not here to get any praise then. But this seems like a simple thing. When you you fill out an inquiry form because you might be interested in this college or university, using Element 451, they've created a little thing where automatically, once you've hit submit on that form, they either text or email you the ability to schedule a visit at the school. Think about that. When people have the greatest amount of interest in your institution, this automatically sends something to them to get them to come out and experience the college or university, in this case, the college. Right when their need is the greatest. So we've got customer service 3.0. The second one is what we call real-time response. Real-time response. And this is an example of a company called Pioneer Federal Credit Union. And when you're in banking, one of the big problems that you have when you have people that have mortgages is when people default on their mortgages. Because once they start to default and miss payments, it's very hard to get them back on track. And so what this credit union was able to do was be able to look at the activity of their customers that have mortgages with them, and to be able to understand the activities that put them in potential jeopardy, and in real time reach out to them when they still had time, not till the end of the month, but in the middle of the month, to help them figure out ways that they could meet their commitment. And as a result, the defaults at Pioneer Federal went way down, which made them a lot more profitable, and it kept those customers with them going forward because they had the ability to act in real time. And that's one of the things I like about Element 451. If you're using it, you have the ability to see patterns of behavior, and once you see those patterns, right, to be proactive in reaching out to the students that you serve. All right, third type within responsiveness is waiting. Does everyone here love waiting? It's fantastic, right? We live in an on-demand world, especially the Gen Z students that you serve. They don't know a world where they can't take out their phone and get an answer to anything that they need. Do you think they like to wait? Not at all. So this is an example from Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, does everybody remember how enjoyable it was to apply for a mortgage? Who really enjoyed that process? It typically takes over 30 days to execute a mortgage. And the problem is you never know where you are in the process, which information you still need to give them, what they're waiting for, what they're waiting for you to give them. And what Wells Fargo did was create a tracker, an app that allowed you to see exactly where you were as part of the process. All right? And in doing so, their customers felt more empowered, the amount of time that it took was reduced, and the experience they had was better because they understood where they were in the waiting process. Now, I couldn't get over this when I saw this case study from Element 451, Southeast Missouri University. This was amazing. Using Element 451, this was from, I guess, a couple years ago, their applications increased by 13%, which I love, and they handled those increases with the same amount of staff. Is that right? And I love this. The ability to get back to those students went from 25 days down to 2 days, right? Whether or not they were accepted as part of the, right? So I love that as thinking about ways that you can radically reduce the amount of waiting time to improve the experience. So kudos to Southeast Missouri for that. The last R is what we call readiness. And readiness to me is kind of the frontier. This is where AI comes in. This is the idea of anticipating what somebody's needs are and knowing it before maybe even they know it themselves. And so one of the types here is what's called location-aware convenience. And this is an example, I love this example in the book. It's from a UK retailer called Tesco. And Tesco found that it was really expensive to hire trucks and hire drivers to deliver groceries. So they came up with this thing instead called click and collect. And the idea was you could still order your groceries online, but you simply were responsible for collecting them. So they built this little kiosk in the middle of the parking lot. And what was neat, if you bought it through the app and you allowed for geofencing, once you got in within 2 miles of the store, it would ping the store that you were on your way. And literally you would drive on up, and because they know you're coming, I think the average amount of time to sign for your groceries and get them in your car was about 20 seconds. That's less than like a NASCAR, that's right around what a NASCAR's pit stop is. And so it's the idea of understanding where your customer is and how do you make things convenient for them, leveraging technology. Last one here I want to talk about, there's three, but I want to talk just one more within readiness. And it's this idea of creating frictionless commerce. Making things absolutely as easy and painless for your customer as possible. Has anyone ever had this happen? Some people refer to this, I think they call it the oh sheet moment. Right? So what do you do in this situation, right? I think when you research this on the internet, people come back with some interesting things. This person was just absolutely cruel. What would MacGyver do? Don't do that. That's not nice to the person that's coming next. But how would you solve for this issue, right? Imagine you sold toilet paper. How do you come up with a solution for this? Well, I don't know what MacGyver would do, but I'm going to go back to my Uncle Jeff at Amazon. He created a solution for this, and he created what's called the Amazon Dash button. And the idea is that you could buy one of these little buttons, you would attach it to the side of your toilet, and it knew exactly the brand that you wanted. It was connected wirelessly through Bluetooth, through your internet, and you simply would press that button. Now, I don't know if it was going to get there that quickly for you, right? But imagine that. Whatever you need, you simply press a button. You don't even have to take out your phone. Just an amazing thing to be able to do. And again, that's the Amazon effect, right? How do you remove friction to make it easy for your customers to do business with you, right? How do you remove that friction? Great. And again, I think that's one of the main benefits of Element, right? You can streamline things, make it extremely easy for the students. Great. All right, so a couple of things before I finish. I'm going to tell a final story, and then I've also got a gift for you guys. But before I do that, if we've got a mic that we can go around with, I want to open it up for questions and comments. Who has the first question? Do we have roving mic? Awesome. But you can't all ask a question all at once. Yes, we've got one right over there. See her? Awesome. All right. All right, we're gonna old school this.
How much personalization is too much personalization?
All right, I almost always get asked that question. How much personalization is too much personalization? So I think you want to try to do as much before it becomes kind of big brother-ish, right? And I tell people you want to focus on being more like big mother and not big brother. Does that make sense? When it starts to go into creepy, then it starts to go across the line. But when it comes across more like we're doing it because we care and we want to provide you this great experience, I think that's the sweet spot. Awesome. Next question.
This works now, yeah.
All right.
When you talk about giving the customer control over their own data, in the student experience beyond the applications process, how do you envision that control happening?
So, to your point, asking about personal data, how do you give them more control, and how does that potentially work from envisioning it? That's a great question. I don't know if I know that exact answer, but for example, is there an app that your students use to kind of manage their experience? No, okay. That could be one thing, right? Is there kind of a portal that they have? Right, so maybe a portal where they can see their information. That's one I think where you've got to figure out and understand the outcomes that you want and figure out how you can give them greater access to empower them. But it's not an easy one at all. Great. Maybe time for one or two more. In the back, yes.
So we're not Amazon. We don't have all the resources they do, of course. We're education. What one or two things would you suggest we start with, because that may be all we get to?
So I think the readiness stuff is interesting, but it's that's kind of the frontier. I think the more stuff that you can do to personalize the experience that you provide for them, reinforcing both, remember we talked about how important the warmth bit is, your intent towards them, and your ability to carry it out. Personalization is key. And then I think increasing the responsiveness would be the area as well. So how do you provide added value to them? And then how do you, this is a purple goldfish thing, how do you reduce the effort that they have to apply, right? Make things easy for them effort-wise. Great. Any other? Okay, we're going to go right into, I'm going to first share a gift. So I called my Uncle Jeff up. You know my Uncle Jeff, right? So my Uncle Jeff at Amazon, I said, I wanted to do something special. You have Purple 2.0, but do me a favor, if you want to take a picture of this, for today only on Amazon, Blue Goldfish is free. And this is going to take you right to Amazon's site. So as long as you have an Amazon account, you can download this. You don't need a code. Just go where it says 0.00 to buy. Watch out for them. They're going to try to get you to do the unlimited. Don't do that. Just buy it for $0.00. And that's my gift to you guys. Again, no code if you want to share that with anyone. You're welcome. Thank you all. And by the way, if you go out and you get crazy with the dueling pianos and you're up till 3 o'clock this morning, it will still work. Why? Because Seattle is based in, Amazon is based in Seattle, so it's midnight for them is 3 a.m. for us. All right, I want to leave you today, and if it's okay, can we all go to the happiest place on earth? Let's all go to the happiest place on earth. I'm going to finish with one last story. And I'm going to take you to Anaheim, California, all the way back to 1955, when they opened the original Disneyland. And it wasn't an overnight success. They really struggled with the experience that they provided. And 2 years in, Walt came up with an idea, right? Walt absolutely loved parades. And so in November of 1957, here was his idea. He wanted to do a parade right down Main Street at Disney for the entire month of December. Now, to pull that off, he had to hire people, he had to build the floats. It was going to cost Disney $350,000 to do it for that following month. To put that in perspective, that's well over $5 million in today's dollars. So who freaked out when they heard that cost? His brother freaked out, his wife probably freaked out, but definitely his accountant and like the people in finance absolutely freaked out. And they went and found Walt, and they sat him down, and they tried to convince Walt not to do the parade. And they reasoned with him. They said, Walt, next month, those customers have already bought their tickets, right? They're already coming out to Disneyland, and they reasoned they're not going to miss it because they're not even expecting it. And Walt looked up at his accountants, and he said, you know what? He said, that's exactly why we need to do the parade. He said, here at Disney, we always need to give our guests more than what they expected. Because he reasoned if they didn't, and they decided not to come back to the park, he said it would cost 10 times the amount of money to get them to come back. Does anybody know what they did in December of 1957? They did the parade. Right? And today, if you go to any Disney park, what's the one signature thing that they do that separates them from any other theme park? It's the parade. And here's a little Disney trivia. What's the most asked question at any Disney park? What time is the 3 o'clock parade? Yes. People ask that. And they're really asking, where do I need to be? What time do I have to show up? Right? Yeah, they did that parade. Oh, I hate that music. I'm sorry. Yeah, they did that parade. And here's the thing, and I love this from Walt, right? Walt's mantra was always about exceeding expectations, right? About doing a little more. And he was so obsessed with it, Walt had his own word for it, and Walt called it plussing. Has anyone ever heard the word plussing before? So plussing for him was what? It was a verb. And he would look at every part of the experience that when you went to Disney, and he would challenge the Imagineers and the cast members, and he would say, how can we just plus it up? How can we just do a little bit more to create a better experience? And so as I leave you guys this morning, my hope is that you're starting to think a little bit differently about the experience that you provide to your students. And you're thinking, what are the signature things that we do to personalize the experience that we provide them? How do we cater to their needs quicker? And how do we get them to work across our channels so they feel like it's a harmonious experience? And my hope is that you're thinking to yourself, for our school, what's our version of the blue goldfish? What's the purple goldfish that we do to go above and beyond? And I hope you can challenge yourself to say, how can we elevate the experience that we provide and truly unify the student experience? Thank you guys. Appreciate it.